they provided got a lot of momentum going and a lot of projects started from that feast, and then the group just didn't have that central leader that Hannah had been talking about to be the one to coordinate having a structured follow-up session and kind of encourage and being that coordinator role to not only continue the momentum created from Feast, but actually look at those action plans that were created at the Feast and make sure that the group is still considering those and acting upon them. So that the Lebanon Feast happened in 2010, in the spring of 2010, and there was a follow-up event that was scheduled then in December of 2010, so about 8 months after the first feast. And then I guess I should just describe the other feast that I was involved with was in Albany, and I helped with a local community group organize that event. And so I'll be talking about kind of the follow-up that has happened from those two events. And how they've morphed from just this loose group of interested community members that came together for the feast event and have become chapters of this larger 10 Rivers Food Web group. So next slide, please. So like I mentioned, we had the Lebanon Feast follow-up in December of 2010, and we had a good showing of people that were still interested in acting upon those action plans and items that were identified in the feast. And basically what we did at this follow-up was to go over, first off, have people recap anything that has happened since the feast. So a really compelling story was there was a food pantry or a free meal site that was connected with a school district and was able to take product from the school that wasn't being used and wasn't put out online and donate it to the free meal site, which in turn allowed them to have another to serve another meal a week. So that was one of the stories that was brought up. But basically we just had folks kind of recap what has happened since the feast. And then we looked at the priority items that were identified at Feast as things that folks wanted to work on, and kind of just reviewed those and talked about how are we going to go forward with all of this work. And much to my surprise, because most people are afraid of adding on meetings, the group was really excited to start to have more consistent community gatherings or meetings to continue working on these items. If they realized that that was the way that this work was going to continue, is that if we were constantly meeting as a group, reviewing those action items, and then moving forward with some. And so from that feast follow-up, we put together a schedule of monthly meetings, and at these meetings decided what was the priority items that we thought we could move on first. And so the first priority was food literacy, or improving food literacy, having events that taught about cooking, nutrition, local farmers, things like that. It was something that was really, that the group was really excited about, and thought that as a group of just volunteer community members, this was something that they wanted to get involved with. And so we identified the Food Day, the first National Food Day, which was October 24th of 2011, as kind of a project or an event to get kind of galvanized behind. We're going to put together an event for this day. And so we talked through some ideas of what folks wanted to do, and ultimately decided that having sort of a food fair where we would introduce community members to some of their local farmers, some of the great organizations that have to do with food, such as OSU Extension. There's a really great farm-to-school program in Lebanon where we had a few members from that group talking about their organization. We had some gleaners. Essentially, it was just kind of a community event that the group wanted to introduce folks to food systems work in Lebanon and Sweet Home area. And so that was something that the group worked a lot on, and we had a ton of volunteers pitching in a number of different ways to get that event advertised and organized, and it was a huge success. We had over 200 people attend. Really had no idea this was the first time an event like this had taken place in Lebanon, in the rural parts of Lynn County. So it was really exciting, I think, for the group members and for myself to just see how much interest there was in this event. And so, and I should say before that, we did an easier event, which was just a tomato tasting at the farmers market. Is something that we had one of the volunteers grows tomatoes and was really excited about just promoting the idea of diversity in agriculture. And so that was some simple tasks that the group felt like we could achieve as this volunteer group in moving forward on our action item of food literacy identified at the feast. So next slide, please. And so following up from the Food Day Fair, another food literacy event that the group identified they wanted to work on was a more in-depth discussion on local agriculture. And so we helped organize with a partner group a panel discussion on local agriculture. And we had a conventional grass seed farmer, an organic farmer, and a grass seed farmer that had started to grow beans and grains, and then also a doctor from the local well, actually it's a university, osteopathic university, to talk about some of the health implications of food. And so again, we were really surprised by just how much interest there was in this event. And the surveys were that people wanted more and more of these kinds of activities. And so the next thing that the group worked on then was to host a winter gardening workshop in the summer to get folks ready to plant for the winter. So basically the key follow-up item that this group worked on was having food literacy events, and it was seen as something that was not only important for their community, that they felt like this was something that was identified at the feast and we wanted to work on, but also was within the scope of a group of volunteers that all have other jobs and maybe don't have as much staff capacity to go out and organize something greater. This was something that the group could take ownership over and work on. And so those were kind of the key events that came from the Lebanon Feast. And I should say, while this was all happening, the group was a little bit was trying to figure out its identity, and at first was really identifying with the feast event, and realized that there are feast events going everywhere, and so we needed to kind of figure out an identity for this group. And at the same time, the larger nonprofit 10 Rivers Food Web was trying to figure out how to better connect these rural community groups with the larger nonprofit. And so over the course of about 6 or 8 months, we worked in discussion with the board and the staff at 10 Rivers Food Web and with the members of the Feast group in Lynn County to create a sort of a formalized chapter relationship so that this group would have would be housed under the larger nonprofit, and in turn there would be a member of the chapter group that would have board representation, so that the activities and events that are going on in Lynn County have a voice at like the board meetings and in strategic planning. So that was a way that this group of volunteers was able to formalize into a part of this larger nonprofit. So while all these events were being organized, the group also worked on fundraising to provide a SNAP match like program that Hannah was mentioning at the local farmers market, and also produced a garden resource guide that we then distributed out to a number of different businesses and different places, and just offered as a free resource guide for folks. So that was a lot of the work that came out of the Lebanon Feast. So if you go to the next slide. And so in the, like I mentioned briefly, there was the Albany Feast was happened in early 2011, in spring 2011, and while there wasn't as much of an official follow-up as the Eastland group, there was a loose group of the organizers that met after the feast to kind of figure out how do we go forward with this, and the same conclusion was made that there needs to be this consistent community gatherings or meetings in order for the momentum not to be lost, but also to just kind of keep pushing forward on the action items that were identified at Feast. So like the Eastland group, this group decided to meet monthly and sort of the same conversations around what are some practical action items that this group of folks volunteering can work on, and the same thing was identified as food literacy, having food system related events or food education events was something that was a priority and practical. And so at first, and I saw that Janice Gregg is on the call, but Janice worked with some of our other volunteers to host cooking demos at the farmers market, which was one way that folks were continuing that improving the food literacy in their community. And then in the fall of that year, actually the Albany group worked with the Eastland group and a lot with Janice and OSU Extension to put together a food preservation fair and teaching folks about the different preservation methods and doing some workshops and having a fair of folks explaining about the different preservation methods, and so that was the work that the Albany chapter had been working on after the feast. And then we had one of the folks that came to the Albany Feast was an osteopathic doctor, and was interested in starting a program to prescribe fruits and vegetable prescriptions to patients or clients that were at risk or had diet-related disease issues. And so while this took a number of years to get rolling, just this last summer they finally have launched the Fruit and Veggie Prescription Program, a pilot program 10 Rivers Food Lab did in conjunction with the doctor. And the prescriptions are going to be redeemable at the farmers market. So it was a partnership between 10 Rivers Food Lab, the doctor's clinic, and then also the farmers market. And so that was something that was identified at the feast, and then through the work of 10 Rivers Food Lab staff and the doctor and the farmers market was able to roll out that program. So next slide. And then in conclusion, I just wanted to talk about a few of the things that I noticed as the lead organizer in this area about some of the challenges or some of the opportunities that were presented from moving from the feast event, the one-time event, into action and getting folks not only, the interest and excitement from the feast event was still there, but it was just a matter of putting together enough critical mass to actually move forward on some of the things. So as many people probably know, in rural areas distance was an issue, and we were working in the Eastland area connecting two communities, and the way that we sort of tried to overcome the difficulties of having two communities working together, or the distance separating between the two communities, was to alternate locations, and that allowed for folks that were in one community that didn't want to or couldn't travel to another for whatever reason, by having the location change every month. We were hoping to get more folks involved that way. I think that, like I mentioned, the consistency of meetings was really important in having a structured follow-up from the feast, and not just having one-off events here and there, but saying we're going to meet monthly and we're going to continue working on all these action items, and just having that commitment to frequent meetings. And then as Hannah mentioned, some of the things about the format of meetings that we identified as being more successful was choosing to be a little bit more informal at the start and having it be a relationship building sort of event, and doing some work as well, but really, we're trying to build community and build relationships here. So the first few meetings were a lot more informal, and we would have them at one of the volunteers' house, have a potluck, sharing food, and just kind of keeping it light, but also realizing the importance of the work that we're doing. That was important in keeping folks wanting to come to these meetings, and not just going to a stuffy sort of meeting where we talk about all the things that need to be changed or need to be moved on, and then not actually doing any of this stuff. That was one way that we found success in moving forward. I think it was pretty clear early on that, just following up on that comment, that having some action motivated or action items to really work on was key in keeping folks motivated and interested. And like I mentioned, something like the tomato tasting was really easy that we could put together without a lot of extra work. The food fair was, a step up, more and more work, but just having that deadline of we're going to do an event on October 24th, and we need to figure out, that's our, creating that deadline for ourselves, I think really helped the group and galvanize the group to action, as opposed to just kind of talking through a bunch of the ideas from the feast. It was really identifying something to work on and getting to work on it and having tangible tasks to work on. And then finally, it was just we tried to make it as easy for folks to be involved, so alternative engagement. If folks didn't want to come to the monthly meetings, I would work as the coordinator to try to fill them in on other sort of volunteer opportunities, if it was like a specific task for an event or a specific part of a program, those kind of things. Finding other ways to get folks involved that are maybe a little bit hesitant to come to a meeting or can't make the meeting for whatever reason. If we were having a meeting in the day and someone couldn't get off work, things like that, we tried to work around those schedules. And then, like Hannah mentioned, just that having an online presence for communication. We had a listserv that was created from the feast, and folks would post to that about interesting events, and that was where we would post about our meetings and notes from the meetings and things like that. And then we tried to offer alternative ways of folks to participate in the meetings, like having folks Skype in or phone in, which we didn't do that much, but we were, thinking about those challenges for folks to be involved with meetings and just trying to figure out the best way to get everyone involved. So with that, I will say that's a wrap, and hopefully we have enough time to answer everyone's questions.
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. Before we go to questions, I just wanted to touch on one more sort of formal follow-up option for a feast that Sharon has been working on with specifically with Wallowa County, but that we're going to try out in a couple of other counties this year. And I see that Sarah Miller from Wallowa County is on the call, so maybe when we get to Q&A, if you guys have questions about how this has been for them, she can speak to that. But they did their feast in February of 2011, and then they had a rare doing community food assessment the year of 2011-12. And at the same time, we're working on forming their Food Systems Council. And so last fall, after their community food assessment was finished and they had been through the feast and they were still sort of looking for some structure on how to tackle the projects that they wanted to do, they had Sharon come out and work with them to develop a one-year strategic plan. So it was very targeted and specific. So what happened first is that the sort of core group of folks from the Food Systems Council looked through all of the opportunities that had been identified both at the feast and through their community food assessment planning process, and prioritize the things that they thought were, the key key things that needed to be done or projects that needed to be tackled. And then they came together in a meeting facilitated by Sharon and just worked through those to develop a plan. Okay, here are all our priorities, but what are the things that we can really accomplish in this next year, and identified those and have been working on that plan, and now Sharon's about to go back out there to review their progress, evaluate their next steps, and to work on developing a plan for the coming year. So it's a relatively simple process, but if that's something, providing that kind of structure can be really helpful to folks, I think, and if it's something that any of you who have been through a feast feel like might be useful or productive for your community, I would encourage you to get in touch with Spencer or Sharon about maybe thinking about scheduling something like that in your community, because it's something we can do to help out and provide some post-feast momentum and structure moving forward. So, okay, this is a grand experiment now. Hopefully there won't be too much background noise. I'm gonna unmute everyone and open it up to questions for anyone who's on the call. I think you all can see the list of participants, so feel free to ask questions.
Megan, hi, this is Marie Simon from FollowUp.
So, like, did anybody watch the news last night and all their crazy complaints about the health?
Oh,
Hello?
guys, hi.
Couldn't get on the...
Hello?
Damn, I was put together wrong, sorry. That didn't work.
Hello?
Hi.
I noticed that all this time doing it, and then it told me I couldn't do anything until
Hi, everybody, you're unmuted.
How did they say his name on the news?
Okay, and I think...
Hi. Megan, hi, this is Marie Simons. And, hey, I was just hearing what you were saying about Sharon coming out and doing a strategic plan.
Yeah.
She's really targeted and focused and a great idea. Is that something that, obviously I'm kind of speaking for our region here that we're working on. It seems to me like, is that something that kind of follows once we have our food assessment in place and maybe we do a more targeted strategic plan? I mean, what's kind of the timing on something like that?
I think, so for those of you who don't know Marie, she's on the south coast of Oregon. And yeah, I think that it probably would make sense for you guys to think about maybe after your assessment process, just because with the rares down there now, I think you're going to, still be turning up maybe some opportunities and connecting with different corners of the community maybe that weren't able to be at the feast, and so you might have a more complete picture of what all of the sort of options are at the end of the assessment process, and that is how it was tackled in Wallowa County. So they did the feast, then they had their rare and did their assessment, and then it was the fall after that where they did their first strategic planning process. So it's definitely something to consider, and we can talk further with you about how that might work.
Okay,
yeah.
That'd be terrific. I don't want to speak for the other folks in our region, but we're definitely looking for some actionable items as we move beyond our assessment, and I think that's how other folks are feeling as well. So I think that would be, I'd like to put that on our radar.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Does anyone else on the call have questions for Hannah or Spencer or myself?
One thing, I apologize because I got called out. We had some people come in, but this is Bill.
Hi, Bill.
First of all, is a copy of this presentation going to be available, or is that? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I can email the slides out to folks afterwards if you're interested. No problem.
Okay. And since I've been away, it would have been really neat if you taped it.
Yeah, someone else asked me to do that, and I forgot to start it at the very beginning, but I started when Spencer started speaking, so I can also share the recording for the second half. I'm sorry, I was sort of busy administering all the different GoToMeeting stuff and forgot to start it right at the beginning, but I will share with everyone the recording that I do have, as well as the slides. Glad to do that.
Thank you much.
Yeah. Any other questions or points of order that folks have? I know we've...
This is Bruce Bartlett, a Washington County guy. I participated in the Dairy Creek food web,
Uh-huh.
and am very grateful that it's still moving along quite well. I am interested in government policy, and in particular the policies of county government, and I'm wondering if there's any examples of where county government has stepped forward to be a partner with the either the feast process itself or in helping sustain the activities after a feast has been done.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to rack my brain.
So I take it by that it's not a consistently common thing that happens.
Not particularly. Nothing's coming to mind in terms of really rigorous follow-up pieces. Like we've had, county commissioners or other county government staff come to the feast events and sometimes, be participatory in the process, but I can't think of any cases where the county government has really stepped up to play a significant role in follow-up.
The reason I'm particularly interested in this is that I have engaged the Washington County Administrative Office and Patrick Prodden of the Multnomah Washington County Extension Director in creating a food action plan for Washington County, and we've been kind of struggling to determine what a good and effective role for county government would be, but it seems like with the human service provision being the domain of county governments, that there's a crossover between human services and the food web business, and I was looking for any pointers or suggestions or enthusiastic support for pursuing this line of work.
Yeah, well, I don't have any right off the bat, but one resource that does occur to me, because I know in maybe not specifically related to the feast process, but in a lot of places, like Hannah mentioned, food system councils or food policy councils are growing up in, not just in Oregon, but all over the country. And there's a group, a national level group, that does a lot of information sharing called the Food Policy something listserv. And so we might be able to throw a question out to them and say, hey, what has your county government been doing to support this kind of food systems work, and see what's happening in other places. So I can check into that and get back to you. I know we have I don't know if you've had a chance to meet Jessica, who's going to be, she's a rare working with us in Washington County this coming year.
Oh yes, I did meet Jessica. She's a BOD, right?
Yes, yeah. And so
I'm a member of one of the Granges, and she came to our Grange meeting and introduced herself.
Great. So I will be working with her, and so through her, or I have your contact information, I think I can get back to you and see if we can come up with some examples of how counties have been involved in food systems work in other places. So yeah, that's a good question.
Megan, I could speak to that just briefly if you want.
Sure, go for it.
We haven't had a lot of success engaging local government. It's definitely an ongoing goal of ours, and we really hope that, as you mentioned with our Food System Council, that's something we can achieve. We talked some with Mark Winnie when he was here. I don't know if folks are familiar with Mark Winnie, but he's done a lot of work with food system councils around the country, and kind of posed that question to him of ways to get local government involved. And really, he's sort of seen that they engage on sort of specific issues. So if you can find an issue or a policy that they might be interested in, then you can kind of get them involved on specific topics. They haven't had a whole lot of luck in sort of getting them involved on the big picture of it all. They do, it is really important to sort of foster those relationships with either government employees, maybe. We've had more luck with staff than actually elected officials. In getting them
me too.
Yeah, in getting them to meetings, that are focused on specific issues. But really, if you can start to foster those relationships, at the beginning, just having a conversation with them, then when there are certain things that you want to engage them on, it's easier to go to them.
Absolutely, and I have an amazing relationship with the admin office in Washington County and OSU Extension.
That's great.
Another question that I have is, oh damn it, it just drained out of my head. I've been chairing a land use citizens group for about a decade, and the emphasis on land use is all about planning and a little bit in reactionary, in having reactions to what's going on. I have seen that food is a much more compelling subject for people to want to get together happily about than land use, which is almost always a negative gathering point. And I am advancing the idea of changing Oregon's mandate to have citizen participation in land use to being a citizen participation in soil use. So that we expand the already existing structures that are mandated for every municipality to provide citizen participation, to focus on food and what we actually do with the soil rather than just acting to keep it from being paved over.
Right.
So if there's anybody, and I would organize the boundaries of this around elementary school boundaries so that you get the inherent organizing power of elementary school parents. And the citizen participation structure in Washington County is ripe for a reorganization. So it's a bit of a, it's not a short game and it's not really a long game, but it's kind of a medium-term project that I'm working on so that the happy qualities of getting together around food and the food webs that are formed become government or municipality endorsed and sustained rather than simply focusing on mere land use. So if that resonates with anybody, please get in contact with me so we can brainstorm.
That's a really interesting idea. I certainly will keep your name in mind if I hear similar interest from anybody around the state. Hannah, isn't there a gentleman down in your way who's real involved in land use planning?
Yeah, we have Holmes who's with 1,000 Friends of Oregon.
Oh, okay.
And he's on our food system council. Is that who you're thinking of?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And yeah, he's part of the statewide 1,000 Friends of Oregon group. And
so I would like to see 1,000 Friends of Oregon actually get productively involved in advancing soil issues and not just obstructing or fighting development applications. They are doing a little bit more proactive, positive work, but they are mostly reactionary and negative, in my humble opinion. And so anybody have any insight into 1,000 Friends sort of supporting the small farmer initiative, that sort of thing?
I am not really familiar with their work beyond having met Ken, and he's been fairly involved with the Rogue Valley planning process. But I'm not very knowledgeable or involved with land use issues, so, you know.
Well, I'm more involved than I want to be, and I want to be involved in
food.
Food.
Yeah.
What was the man's name again?
Greg Holmes.
Greg Holmes.
Greg. And he's in Jackson County?
He's in Grants Pass, actually.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Well, does anyone else have other questions or thoughts before we close here? Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I hope that you heard or had some ideas sparked of something that was useful for you. And I will definitely share what recording I have as well as the slides with all of you who are on the call now. And look forward to speaking to you again soon. One thing I do want to share with the folks who are still on the call is that I actually will be moving to a different position at the food bank starting in 2 weeks. And so Spencer will be taking over full-time, working with, and of course Sharon is still here. And I definitely hope to stay connected definitely to Feast work. I'll be working in the metro area as the agency capacity and education manager, so I will be overseeing this kind of work and other technical assistance to agencies, specifically in the 4-county metro area. So, so I'm moving on, but I'll still be at the food bank and still be a resource. But if you want to contact someone about how to follow up on your feast, I would encourage you to get in touch with Spencer or with Sharon. So have a good rest of your day, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Megan, for what you've done.
Yep.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.